What's up, everybody? So, keeping with the whole list rambling ideas that I've done, this is going to be another list ramble. They're fun for me to do. Hopefully, you enjoy them. And this is going to be another top three list, and this is going to be looking at the legions again. But from pre to post heresy, the top three lists for my picks for legion that have changed the most pre to post heresy. I don't mean becoming a chapter for the loyalists, and I don't mean a color change necessarily either. Um, is that all change? Yes, but it's not like a core fundamental change, but more so a fundamental core kind of change to the very kind of way in which the Legion either does things or views things or whatever the case might be. And when you start looking at forces, you can make a case for a decent amount of legions having a pretty fundamental change pre to post heresy, be them chaos or loyalist alike. So, with that said, what are your picks? Share them in the comment section below. I'm going to give you my top three, but with a quick honorable mention of the Death Guard. The Death Guard don't make the list, but I give them an honorable mention because even though the core of what they are really hasn't changed, despite being devotees of Nurgle and the Plague Marines that they are, they have undergone such a massive change physically, visually, without changing the color, that it's just been a color of decay and rot and ruin, affecting their armor, blinding their armor up. But they have undergone such a big change that way that it's worth mentioning for sure. But having said that, the reason why they are an honorable mention as opposed to being on the list is because the core of how the Death Guard have done things since being a Legion really hasn't changed. The whole alchemical, baleful weapon warfare that they've always done hasn't changed. It's just a different style of weapon now, being Nurgle infected and all that, and being disease and putrescence ridden and all that jazz. They went from just, salting the land, salting the earth, and burning things up, and using even phosphex weapons here and there, and when necessary, and just using alchemical fires, baleful fires that are just really toxic to the enemy, aside from just burning them, that they were resistant to because of their gene seed and all that. They went from just doing that and grinding down in a meat grinder type situation of attritional warfare to doing that, but with the gifts and boons of Nurgle in place of those weapons. So that their weapons are spitting out a stream of burning bile and all that jazz, as opposed to being actual fires, some type of magical Nurgle bile stuff and what have you. So what they do is the same, it's just how they're doing it's different, but it is such a big change or worth an honorable mention. Having said that, though, coming in at number 3 is the Thousand Sons Legion, which has undergone a big change as well. But I view them as being a bit of a change, not just physically, not just color scheme wise, which is a thing with them. They went from being red and gold to being blue, yellow, and gold, or red, white, silver, gold, to being blue, yellow, and gold, the colors of Tzeentch. But on top of that, they also went a physical change with a bulk of the force becoming Rubric Marines because of the Rubric of Ahriman trying to cease the chaos mutation of the Legion, which was becoming widespread and rampant given that they were devotees of Tzeentch. Either way, it would have been a big change for them. And we also have a change, I feel personally, when you look at them, and kind of a philosophy of the Legion. When they were loyalists, when they had Prospero, when the Emperor visited them on Prospero and all that, they or visited Magnus on Prospero and made that the home world of the Thousand Sons, they were really warrior scholars, warrior mage, scholar knights, and all that, if you will. And there was a real kind of Renaissance air to the way they were doing things, a kind of a sense of enlightenment and understanding and working towards mastery and control of all things with their mind, with their psychic potential and all that, and amongst the human populace as well, and of their homeworld. It was kind of a real glimpse into what could be if psychers were not treated as the witch scum of the earth that they tend to be treated as in the Imperium, for sure, because of all the problems being tied to the warp as they are. So it went from that, and we saw how that went eventually, to being devotees of Tzeentch, to having a bit more of a closed-minded yet open to the potentials of sorcery and magic. they've kind of become twisted mirrors in a sense from what they were, and that's why I say that they belong on this list for me. But they're in the number 3 spot because they're a twisted mirror of what they were, but they still do a lot of stuff very similar. It's just in a twisted, kind of opposite. Not so much, I kind of opposite, but it is in a twisted mirror sense. Is the best way to put it. Is what they are now. It's really a shame because I really like them as a loyalist force, but we have them being the quintessential Chaos Sorcerer Legion, and which is basically the opposite of everything they kind of stood for beside this, before this, but it kind of was forced upon them for survival's sake. So there you go. So that's coming in at number 3, the Thousand Sons Legion. Coming in at number 2 is the Blood Angels, the Sons of Sanguinus. They underwent, obviously, a change from being a legion to a chapter, which doesn't matter for the purposes of this ramble, but the Sons of Sanguinus, the Blood Angels gene seed, and all that jazz, underwent a big change at the height of the Battle of Terra when Sanguinus died to Horus. It triggered something in the Blood Angels. They all snapped, went crazy, and threw back the enemies from the palace gates, the Emperor's palace and all that. They really threw them back, but this is what really triggered their curse. This is when their curse really got rooted and cemented in their being, due to the empathic nature of the Legion with their Primarch. So prior to this, there were some flare-up instances of their berserk nature from the Black Rage, Red Thirst concepts in certain battles, certain pivotal engagements, amongst, some of their number when Sanguinus was heavily injured by a demon. A lot of them went berserk there as well, which was understandable. It was kind of like a precursor to his death. But it was something that Sanguinus was aware of, concerned about, but really didn't know how to deal with it at the time. He never got the chance to figure it out either. But it went from being a thing kind of along the same lines of the Flesh Change and the Wolfenworth thing for the Thousand Sons and the Space Wolves, if you will, to becoming in-your-face problem that could affect you any day of the week at any point if you're not careful or just unlucky or get too lost in the ways of battle or what have you. It's basically a constant threat to the Blood Angels' existence that they deal with on a daily basis, if you will, in the post-heresy setting of 40k. Something that you didn't have to worry about as a legion. So we had them being really aggressive, kind of paragons of that aggressive assault warfare, to now having that same methodology of warfare potentially damning them to the Black Rage, or letting them get consumed by the Red Thirst and causing issues such as not being able to discern friend from foe and ripping apart your guardsmen allies alongside the traitor forces and drinking their blood. Supposedly, rumors, only rumors, but that type of tragedy has befallen the Blood Angels that they didn't have to worry about during the Great Crusade and during the pre-heresy time period. So all that came about with the death of Sanguinus. Now, the more we learn about the Blood Angels pre-heresy, the more we're going to learn a bit about potential flare-ups, I'm sure, and a lot of foreshadowing that they're setting up on purpose, because the fluff likes to be heavy-handed that way at times. But we will also learn about how they are without having to worry about that scare and that concern of their gene seed's curse. So we see amongst their successors forces that aren't able to cope as well as the Blood Angels. Flesh Terrors seeming to be really, really heavily afflicted by the curse, for example. And then we have Dante, the longest running chapter master, who seems to have it in some way under check somehow, or at least has got remarkable willpower to keep himself in check for that long. And you have the potential case of Mephiston, looking like he's like a very rare case of almost mastery over it and control over the curse. The constant seeking to look for a cure and so forth. So real big change, I think, pre to post heresy. Having said that, it hasn't really changed what they do. They just are now trying to be masters of warfare and masters of themselves on top of it, which is why they're number 2. Number 1 on this list, I think we see a huge change, and part of this is because we didn't know much about them to begin with during the pre-heresy time period. The more we learn things of how different they are pre to post heresy, and that is the Dark Angels Legion. Another force that became a chapter, yes. Had a color scheme change as well, yes. But The Dark Angels pre to post Heresy. Obviously, the Fallen was the huge big thing we knew about the Dark Angels after the Horus Heresy. That half the Dark Angels Legion turn from the Emperor's Light, and that's what the Fallen Angels are. And they have to hunt them down and force them to repent or kill them in the process, basically. And that has become the driving force of the Dark Angels. But as we learn more about the Dark Angels Legion time period, the more we learn about them, the more we see the differences, because they had nothing to worry about fallen-wise beforehand. They were just a ruthless, capable force. And the more I learn about them, the more I want the Dark Angels Legion as the force from 40k instead of what we have with the whole fallen shenanigans. But this is a kind of an interesting case because it's not so much we know they always had this change coming, but it's kind of self-imposed change due to the fluff we know about them post-heresy, and then setting up things like the hexagrammaton and so forth pre-heresy. Big differences to what they are. We see them adopting the Codex Astartes form for the most part amongst their organization, with only 2 of the 6 wings being present amongst their formation, maybe just due to size constraints or whatever. We don't know exactly why the Deathwing and the Ravenwing were the only forces chosen, but they're the only ones that remain. Well, we know why on a design standpoint. Those are the only 2 that were first created. We didn't have the Dreadwing and the Firewing necessarily, and even the Ironwing wasn't, being the oldest 3rd one we knew about, you could say, was still not something I think from the get-go necessarily. So as we come up with new and cool things for the Dark Angels, we invariably get more and more of a change from what they were Legion-wise to post-heresy, and that's what's on top of this list, because once we get the Forge World Horus Heresy book with the Dark Angels in it, we're going to see the Hexagrammaton hopefully in its glory, and we're going to see how different they are pre to post heresy just because of that alone. This is a case of a force also, even without that we see just so much harping on the hunt for the Fallen. It consumes everything they do, and they can go decades without hunting Fallen, but it permeates the air around them, you could say. When you read about, for example, the Purging at Catalyst Harbor, that Space Marine Battles novel of fighting against the Orcs, there's nothing to do with the Fallen there at all. It's purely killing Orcs. But there are certain scenes that you read about in that novel where it's almost like there's somebody in the background whispering, "Fallen is a thing still." So it's like it's hanging in the air heavy as an implied thing, even though there's nothing to do with that when you're hunting orcs and fighting against orcs. So there's that. And also in the Codex, and every edition of the Codex is more and more heavy-handedness about how much the Fallen permeate everything. Again, even though they can go decades without getting any knowledge about the Fallen. So it's I put them on the top of this list partially because I'm a big fan of them, of course, but and just seeing the differences and how much they're consumed, not just in the lore, but the actual development of the Dark Angels as a force by GW, and everybody harps on the Fallen to such an nth degree that we don't really get a chance to see what the Dark Angels are like outside of that. I mean, we get to see how they execute warfare, but even when we see them doing that without any Fallen intent, because they're dealing with orcs, for example, we don't really get to see them not dealing with it. It's always in the back of their mind, kind of the way the curse of the Blood Angels gene seed is, only this isn't a curse of their gene seed, but it's a mission that those who are in the inner circle and in the know will never forget about and will constantly be on the lookout for, even while killing hordes of orcs. So there's that. So they're at the top of my list for that big change from the Fallen, as well as with the Hexagrammaton being kind of dismembered, or dismantled, I should say, and all that jazz. Puts them at the top of the list for me. So thanks very much for sticking through this ramble. What's your top 3 list for legions that have changed the most pre to post heresy, and why? Share it in the comments section. Thanks very much for sticking through yet again, top 3 ramble. I'll be doing more than this stuff, but I just keep getting these ideas that pop into my head, and they're kind of easy to ramble about, so I do it. Because why not? Anyways, thanks very much for sticking through it, and until the next one, take it easy.